Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. So, what you see on your screen is the first installment of our roundtable series, the Carbon Table. So, Fitsol has put out a lot of webinars and podcasts, which is called the 2 Degrees Talks, which you would be seeing on our YouTube channel. And we wanted to create something which was more focused and sort of discussion led, which is why we decided to start our own roundtable series, Carbon Table. Today's session, as you can see, is titled Scaling Supply Chain Decarbonization with AI and Automation. So, this is a topic that sits at the intersection of technology as well as sustainability and implementation. We have some great speakers with us today. We have Akshay, who is our CTO as well as our co founder, and he brings the technology perspective into this discussion today. Besides that, we have Yeshvanth. He is our Chief Strategy Officer, and he will talk about the client side implementation and operational realities which are faced by clients. And then we have Meenakshi. She is leading our ESG team, and she will bring a sustainability as well as a reporting lens into the picture. This session today will be moderated by Sukanya, who is also an integral part of our ESG team, and she will be guiding the discussion for us today. So, over the next 1 hour, we'll be covering themes like data challenge in supply chain and what it really takes to scale decarbonization across supply chains. We can ask all our questions at the end of the session when we have the Q&A open. So with that, let's start. We'll start with this video on Mission Life, and we will begin right after that. Thank you so much.
We are just a tiny speck in this vast universe. But are we sure the truth is only what meets the eye? Think again. This is our doing. India, known for large-scale behavioral change programs, has once again recognized the urgency and has led the global alliance with Mission Life.
मिशन लाइफ क्लाइमेट चेंज के खिलाफ लड़ाई का लोकतांत्रिक डेमोक्रेटिक एक प्रकार से उसका विस्तार कर रहा है, जिससे हर कोई अपने सामर्थ्य के हिसाब से योगदान दे सकता है। मिशन लाइफ इस बात पर भरोसा करता है कि छोटे छोटे प्रयासों का भी व्यापक प्रभाव हो सकता है। मिशन लाइफ हमें प्रेरित करता है कि हम सब अपनी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में ऐसा बहुत कुछ कर सकते हैं जिससे पर्यावरण की सुरक्षा हो।
Revolutionizing general outlook, our Prime Minister envisions to change individual and community behavior to bring in significant impact on the environmental and climate crisis. Life's objective to take individual and collective action for protecting and conserving the environment. Looking to bring in paradigm shift, Mission Life envisions 3 core transformations: change in demand, change in supply, and change in policy. Simplistically put, Lifestyle for Environment is a mission to help you identify simple acts in our daily lives that can contribute significantly to climate change. The ideology is designed keeping in mind that the actions would be specific and measurable, easy to practice by individuals, communities, and institutions, and non-disruptive to ongoing economic activity, and in fact promoting economic activity on the foreseeable future. So, let's take a pledge today and show to the world that we are environmental conscious and can lead the path for the world to follow. Lifestyle for Environment.
Thank you, Anjali, for the lovely introduction, and thank you everyone again for joining us today. So when we talk about corporate climate goals and decarbonization strategies, we have seen that organizations have made reasonable progress when it comes to scope 1 and scope 2. The major reason being complete control over data and operations. But the real challenge begins when it comes to scope 3 emissions, and that too, especially for supply chain emissions. While scope 3 emissions contribute to nearly 60 to 90% of the total VAG inventories in case of most organizations, companies are still struggling to measure and manage these emissions across large and complex multi-tier supply chains. So the there is one thing that we need to remember, that there is no lack of intent from the organizations. The major challenge is on the major challenge being the dependency on suppliers, and that is what we are discussing today. We will focus on the major challenges which are on ground, that are faced by the organizations when they try to strategically engage with suppliers and they want to collect data from suppliers, how we can bridge the gap, and how AI, tech, and automation is playing a crucial role in helping organizations to move forward. So, Yashwant, as your experience with working closely with organizations, what are the challenges that organizations are currently facing while they go opt for supplier engagement to collect supplier emissions data? What is your experience on that?
Good. Hey, thank you for the introduction, Anjali. Yeah, a great context setting, Sukanya. So let me take a step back, right? So when we're talking about organizations, it's essentially the original equipment manufacturers you're talking on the top of the pyramid, right? Like, so they're the ones who have the intent, and anyone below level one or level two, which is your tier one manufacturers or tier two manufacturers, example in an automotive manufacturing sector as example, right? That even the intent is lacking because and there is a very predominant understanding that I think scope is sorted majorly in India, right? Like again, but that data comes from leading consultancies talking to listed companies, and it's all biased database. Once you actually go down inside the country and go across the sector, right? There's so many about 95% of the manufacturing actually lies in these auto component or ancillary manufacturers, right? Where mostly 75% of them do not even have awareness or intent. The pre-existing databases are kind of biased towards what they've got for. It's not wrong. It's just that the boundaries were set differently. So coming to this, even scope and scope 2 data has been a challenge across the value chain. And because customers are left, as in these manufacturers are left for left little clueless, right? Because they have multiple manufacturing units across the country. Say someone has about 21, and then they do not know how to do appropriation of emissions towards one customer because their process and activities are spread across different units. That is one of the challenges I see. Another major challenge is that for even OEMs to get towards scope 3, it's really shattered across. Say example, let's take a simple example of upstream transportation, right? For any tier 1 or tier 2 company to do upstream and downstream transportation, the databases today sits across 3, 4 systems. I think it is a world of technology-driven challenges, which I hope Akshay and teams are already building and hoping to see solver in bigger scale also. Say there are databases, information sitting across e-way bills, transportation management system, ERP, and then bringing all of it together. Okay, thank you, sir. So, okay, fine, I'll tone it up. So the major challenge, say someone like something like a upstream transportation or downstream transportation, is that the data insights sit across multiple systems. Say something, few of the information sits in e-labels, some of the information sits in transportation management system, some of the information sits across ERP. Stitching it all together to even do a baselining is a huge exercise. And then is why the challenge people are not even moving towards activity-based emission tracking, right? Most of the people are settled towards spend-based emission tracking, majorly because there's complexity across the value chain, because data is being fragmented across different systems. That is one of the challenges. And one of the major challenges, Sukanya, I think we've seen that is starting to rise while sustainability grows, right? There's also mushrooming of different frameworks, different assessment tools that's coming up. And companies are finding it difficult to maintain consistency and transparency across different systems. Why? Because each of the end client gives them a particular framework or a particular timeline. They fill in the data and do it. And again, it comes back to them with a different framework, different setting, and they again do it, right? So I think it consistently exists across different systems and different reporting standards also. I think these are the three, four major challenges I see as we stand today.
Oh, so is there a lack of capability at the suppliers end? Uh, I mean,
Uh,
the organizations feel that there is a lack of capability when it comes to ESG and sustainability? Uh, and specifically in case of India, where our suppliers are basically very small or medium level organizations. So, is there a gap in ESG related capabilities?
Got it. I think there's some internet issues, and I'll also turn off my videos so that there's better bandwidth. Uh, Coming to your question, Sukanya, yes, it's a huge gap and void in the ecosystem, right? While globally sustainability has been matured, India is just on the path towards early adoption, right? Whenever there is early adoption of any new framework or standard or complaints, right? Markets are not ready because it's not a capability driven complaints market. It's complaints, it's like top down approach, right? Once you bring in the complaints, and then people are running around to figure out how do we start about it, right? Most of the people do not even have teams to start with. Forget capability. There's no teams to say like. In recent example, last week went and met a very huge manufacturer who's making above 6 and 7 crores. They had a HR and admin people taking care of this. And these are the guys who are not even been introduced to such terms. It just came to them that 2 weeks back, a client of them gave them a requirement checklist, and they're running around. It's like it is literally like chickenless heads running around to see where do they sort of. Yeah, that's a huge observation. Thank you for bringing that out.
Okay, thanks, Yeshwanth, for the insights. So, Meenakshi, from ESG perspective, what are the methods that are being followed to measure these supply chain emissions? And what is the most accurate method according to you and according to the best followed frameworks? Is there a gap that exists there? What are your insights on that?
Yeah, thanks, Sukanya. I would like to respond to this, taking forward the last question that you raised to Yeshwanth, which is there a lack of capability on the supplier's end? So yes, actually, based on my experience of working with multiple MSME suppliers, there is definitely a lack of capability because most of these suppliers are not aware of the need for calculating emissions. So since they are not even familiar with the need, how will they even devote resources to conducting the exercise required for estimating emissions? So because of this, there is no visibility on where the emissions are coming from at the supplier's end. And then suddenly they get burdened with these customer requests where all these customers are simultaneously asking for almost similar data. What are your product level emissions? What are your scope 1, scope 2 emissions? What are your logistics related emissions? What targets have you taken to reduce your emissions? What kind of, supplier capacity building are you conducting for your own suppliers? And for these MSME suppliers, all these things are very new and beyond their capabilities because they don't really understand the requirement of doing all these exercises. For them, it is just a customer requirement, so they have to comply because it's a business need for them. So coming to your question as to what is the best method, see, if I have to go behind the actual methods of calculating emissions, one is called the average data method, which requires you to, rely on some industry average based emission factors to estimate your, emissions, GHG emissions. But the most accurate is called the supplier specific emissions, where you take the data from the supplier itself as to what are the emissions embedded in the products that they're selling to the customers. That is the most accurate and, closest to the source emissions that you can get for the products that you're procuring. Now, because the suppliers are not really aware of how to calculate the emissions, so building that capability becomes very crucial. And for all these large companies, large automotive OEMs, they have thousands of suppliers, which means, collecting data from thousands of suppliers is a huge challenge for them. They cannot reach out to one supplier only. And the data that the suppliers are also holding is not really, in standardized formats. Every supplier is capturing data in their own way, based on their own convenience. So to collect data from thousands of suppliers and ensure the data coming from these suppliers is also accurate. It can be useful for the auto OEMs to set their own emission reduction targets. That is also a challenge for the large companies. So, like I said, supplier specific method is the most accurate method for calculating emissions. Next comes average data, where you rely on industry averages. And the least efficient method is called the spend-based method, where you're basically just calculating your emissions based on the revenue that you're making. So the emission intensities are calculated in terms of emissions per unit of revenue generated or per unit sales made. That is considered the least efficient because revenues and sales figures can change year on year. The idea is to actually shift away from spend-based methods towards average data and then finally towards supplier-specific methods to get the most accurate supplier-specific emissions. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Meenakshi. Yes. So what we understand that there is definitely a lack of capability, there is definitely a lack of visibility, and also there are data which are fragmented in multiple stations. So that is where the tech comes in play. So Akshay, from a tech perspective, how digital platforms integrated with AI and automation can help organizations to simplify the process, to simplify the data collection process across multiple suppliers in a large and complex supply chain.
Right. And I think both Yeshwanth and Meenakshi have uh, very well articulated what are the various challenges, right? Be it the scale of the data. So, in terms of data, if I have to talk, like both volume as well as velocity is very high, right? Then we add a layer of complexity, right? Multimodal complexity when we talk about it. So the data could be residing in multiple systems. The data could be residing in multiple formats as well, right? So it could be PDF, invoices, RFQs, Excel tables, and whatnot, right? So it really becomes very difficult for from a capability perspective. We see, as Yeshwanth was mentioning, that not right folks are sort of within the supplier ecosystem. Not right folks are skilled in how to articulate data when it comes to sustainability calculations or ESG assessments and so on, right? It's just a task for them. And to add to that, it's not their core responsibility, right? This is one of the tasks, maybe once in a year or once in a quarter, they have to touch upon, run helter skelter, or probably hire a consultant and get these things done, right? But with technology coming in, a lot of these things are getting accelerated, right? So, look, technology can solve uh, things in three ways, if I have to put it into a structure, right? I can use technology to directly solve something, right? I can use technology to identify new opportunities, or I can use technology to accelerate the current activity that I'm doing, right? While we are doing so in this parlance, right, in this particular context, I would say that AI has a significant capability to accelerate. Uh, though we enable a lot of our customers also that we work with, how to assimilate this data and be it in any format. We don't ask customers or people who we work with to provide us data in a set format, right? Which is a general case, right? You go to a consultant, they will say, "Ki, I want data in this format, or give me these kinds of data," right? Uh, I remember one of the suppliers of our customers shared ledger data with us from Tally, right? And it was a huge ledger, and it has all the kinds of credit debit entries, right? To making sense of credit debit entries and create and extracting the relevant information in itself is a humongous task, right? How would a person who does not have an understanding of ESG domain would be able to achieve this? So this is where it comes handy, right? Technology is solving it in very straightforward manner. Plug in the technology. The technology should be able to clean the data, right? Bring it to a structured format internally without exposing the nuances to the user. use that data to identify what kind of activities or categories of emissions, or under ESG also what kind of pillars or what kind of area it is going to sort of respond to or process this information under, then identify. So for example, if I'm only taking the, let's say, GHG inventorization, right, that is what I'm talking about. Under that also, I need to know which activity will correspond to which kind of category, and within the category, what kind of emission factors depending on where the data has originated from. So which geography, which sector, right, which kind of activity, and so on. The AI will be able to quickly understand which emission factor is to be applied, apply it, calculate, show outcomes, right? So this activity, which would have taken couple of months maybe by any manual with manual effort and all, could be done in maybe a matter of minutes, seconds, depending on what kind of technology capabilities you have. So that is the kind of acceleration in the current set of activities that is happening. And then, of course, in terms of this, so that this adds to the problem of decarbonization, right? So if I'm talking about decarbonization as such, if the team within the organizations are focusing on calculation and compliance and those kind of activities throughout the year, when would they have bandwidth to think about decarbonization, or let alone implementing such initiatives, even if they have something in mind, right? So the intention of any technology solution, or the outcome of the technology solution, should be very clear, that it should take over the mundane activity, which is the calculation, data cleaning, data simulation, and so on. And then, based on your subject matter expertise and your understanding of the organizations, the team within the organizations would be able to sort of work on the next set of activities, which is thinking about decarbonization.
Right. So here's a very important part that has come out of this discussion, that there's one part that is measurement and there's another part that is management. So we are enabling organizations to measure their data with the help of tech, AI, and automation, that too at scale. And we are also trying to help them manage their emissions to decarbonize across their different categories in scope 3 and make business decisions with that data. So Yashwant, as per your experience with organizations, working with organizations, so how can they use this emissions data to take impactful business decisions? How can this emissions data help them in taking decisions? Because the ultimate goal is not just to measure, it is to manage and decarbonize. So how the data can help them?
Got it. So actually, very. I think this conversation is heading in a very right direction. I'm liking it. So one point that Meenakshi mentioned about how people are not allocating costs to these activities currently, and people are not having the right resources, is also a function of how people are treating this as cost center. So people are not understanding this could be revenue generating centers by itself, right? Like we've seen this internationally. People are able to generate revenue or bring in cost savings through sustainability as such, right? I think once people get adopted or acknowledged to this as an entire activity, I think your question of saying like, how will people even use this data will come in. Also, another point when Akshay mentioned about use of technology and what all we are doing, right, to accept all that is being done today. One other beautiful point that I understood from on a recent client and then the acknowledgement was in terms of accuracy. The same exercise was done across multiple of the plans manually with consultants, Excel, and all of that. What technology could do in terms of accuracy by using the right and recent updated emission factors is something that they really appreciated, right? I think with the right data and then the right intent is when you can actually take the actions. So I think leveraging tech and then our human, we can't discount all the expertise that comes from the sustainability domain, right? Like their consultants will still be needed. There will be subject matter experts in the likes of Meenakshi or Sukanya will still be needed to take forward and to see what can be done with this data, right? We all know the recent crisis that's happening across India, right? The shortage of fuel or gases. Uh, in exactly last 3 4 weeks, we got inbound requests from multiple organizations because they depend on either LPG or some other gases. Earlier, it was just an emission related activity for them. But now suddenly the sustainability team is getting a lot of push through from the procurement team because they're not able to meet their daily task assist, right? Why is even sustainability important is another awakening point. Like, what is this current scenario, right? To be a self-sufficient, sustainable businesses, you can operate with the existing resources available itself. You needn't be dependent on someone which is far away. The supply chain, complex value chain, right? It's not only increasing the emissions, but it's also increasing the risk, right? The entire supply chain resilience is not really thought through, and hence why sustainability has to also be deeply corely integrated is another good example of what the scenario is going through. And a lot of people are now finding ways to see how can their systems, machines get fine-tuned to adapt to biofuel options or biogases, right? Um, good to see this, but I hope how to see this sustain is going to be another huge challenge. And also one other point now I see with the intent, as you mentioned in the very first conversation, Sukanya, was that the OEMs, the tier one, the OEMs about the tier one, tier two companies, them having the right intent of just not monitoring and measuring it for a marketing angle, but for actually creating the impact, right? That comes from them knowing what to do with the data. So we're working with multiple organizations now to see what can be done to reduce scope and scope 2 emissions, what can be done towards reducing scope 3 emissions, right? And there are beautiful solutions and playbooks available in the market, which will not be a cost driven exercise, but will be cost saving exercise in parallel to a emission savings angle, right? So I think you might know, but for the larger audience, at Fitsol, we call this DNA. We have a core DNA called the TCO square framework, right? Total cost optimization, total carbon optimization. So I think there are pockets by which we are identifying and solving for this, even in scope and scope two. Majorly scope two because it's touch easier and proven with international standards. Scope one and scope three solutions are to be customized because it's relevant to our Indian markets, our machineries, our manufacturing processes, and the value chain, supply chain are all very tailored for India. So sustainable solutions are also to be tailored and accustomed to it. So it can't be one copy paste solutions of what is being done in the West towards our country to also adopt to it. We are in early days, but good to see that we are the pioneers in this, and proudly to say that we are also able to scale the impact.
Thank you, Yeshwanth. Thank you so much for the insights. So there's not only a noble benefit. I mean, there's not only the benefit of decarbonization, there is also a benefit that is happening on the bottom line of the organizations. A cost savings is also associated with the emission savings, right? So, Meenakshi, I would like to ask you, how can organizations, ensure that the data that are being collected from the suppliers are credible enough, and how can they reliably engage with suppliers to actually take some action in decarbonization? How can organizations ensure that they meaningfully engage with their suppliers?
So thanks, Sukanya. So see, companies have multiple suppliers, and if they want to seriously estimate their scope 3 emissions and then move towards decarbonizing their scope 3 emissions, they need to approach scope 3 decarbonization with some serious intent. And the first thing to do is to actually develop proper supplier engagement programs where they sensitize suppliers about why they are capturing the data that is required for them to calculate their emissions. These supplier sensitization programs or supplier engagement programs should be, tailored made for suppliers based on the supplier categories. And then, periodically engage with these suppliers on a quarterly basis or on a half yearly basis, get the data from them, and then, in a standardized format or through the use of digital tools, like Akshay mentioned, if the companies have access to digital tools, nothing like that, get the data in the format or through the digital tools. And then, of course, the entire exercise of, verifying the data has to happen both at the supplier end as well as at the OEM end. It, although having a digital tool solves that problem significantly, because usually digital tools have these emission factor databases built into them. So the verification part gets sorted there only. But just in case companies that cannot, afford digital tools, obviously then they will have to go through the manual route only to capture the data. So then the data verification becomes a manual exercise. And when it becomes a manual exercise, verification becomes a challenge. So coming back to Akshay's point that digitalization is going to not only make it easier for you to report the emissions, it will also make it easier for you to to verify the emissions that are being reported by the suppliers. So, like I said, digitalization is the only way to ensure that the data that you are getting from the supplier end is accurate and is verified and without any tampering or any kind of fudging done on the data. And of course, most of these digital tools, like what even Fitsol has, they are capable of generating reports that give you access to the kind of emission factor methodologies that have been used for estimating emissions, or if the company has used any kind of assumptions, for calculating these emissions, those things are also get captured in the reports. So then the verification of these emissions and the methodologies behind calculating them becomes easier to verify. So just summing it up, I think digitalization is the way to ensure that verification can be
Yes, so that the data
Sukanya,
appropriate.
coming.
Sukanya, as a business person, I have to do this plugin. Digital tools are available. It's all Kyoto is a standard industry driven platform. Also, adoption is there, and also our pricing model has been very effective. So I think we've solved for that in India, right? Built for India, built for Indian companies. The pricing model is also effectively evolved in a way within Fitsol. So I think what Meenakshi has mentioned in her experience, she's seen companies not being able to afford tools, but I think our Kyoto platform is essentially solving for that also. I think as a business person, I had to call this out in the right time. Thank you for bringing that up, Meenakshi.
Yes, thank you, Yeshwanth. Thank you so much. And Akshay, so from a tech perspective, share with us how digital platforms usage of AI and automation is different from manual calculations. I mean, if we manually calculate the emissions across scope 1, 2, and 3, what are the insights that we won't get if we use digital platforms, that we get from a digital platform but we do not get in manual calculations? What are the insights and how the digital platforms going to help us?
Right. As I was mentioning earlier as well, the digitalization, right? When we talk about digitalization, there are two aspects happening. One, the data that we are getting, how it gets digitalized, the data that is spread across systems and artifacts, documents, and whatnot, right? And additionally, how second part would be that whether this uh, verifiability or veracity of the data as such that is getting into the system for emission calculation or for decarbonization is correct or not, right? So on those two fronts, right, technology can really work very well, be it structured or unstructured data. A lot of organizations, not only in sustainability space, right, but say, for example, there's a company called Brainbox. They have implemented a solution called so they are working on the HVAC optimization, right? So what it does is it's a very simple aspect, and when you would listen to the use case, you would say this is hygiene. This should have happened, right? But generally it does not, right? So for example, so buildings are one of the largest sources of emissions globally, right? The energy consumption that happens across buildings and all. So this organization, what they're doing is they're playing HVAC optimization. So they will check the occupancy, what is the current weather condition outside, right? What is the temperature right now in the vicinity, or the kind, if there are any special needs, that area requires some special needs, and so on. If these kind of rules are defined, once it has all the information, it just modulates the temperature, optimizes the temperature so that it reduces the energy consumption. And on an average, they have been able to achieve 25% emission reduction with just HVAC optimization. It's a great thing for scope 2, right? Now, how would this data, how would they have come up with this hypothesis that, HVAC optimization will lead to X, Y, Z or X% of emission reduction? Of course, when you look at the data, you look at the occupancy. So there's a manual way of working, right? If we had to do it, we would have to deploy some control center, some building management software, where a person is sitting, looking at occupancy. Oh, this meeting room is not occupied, but still lights and HVAC is on. Can I switch it off? And so on, right? So all these levers were already present earlier as well. But again, optimization was not possible. And Yeshwanth mentioned a very great point, right? That TCO square aspect, right? Total carbon optimization and total cost optimization. When organizations take a capitalistic lens, right, the cost becomes a very important aspect, right? Investing into something that might give some sort of reduction in terms of sustainability would not really gel well with the capitalistic mindset, right? Because companies are out there to make profit at the end of the day, right? So it is very important that you take the cost angle, right? The data is there, technology can assess what are your cost hotspots, and then understand which of these hotspots are also emission hotspots. Wherever the convergence is there between these two aspects, you can prioritize those elements and then look at, okay, this is something that can be worked upon to be able to create an outcome in the future, right? Which there is some sort of ROI also, guaranteed ROI that would come out of it. In this scenario, the example that I gave, it's the same thing, right? So I have the data available with me that, this is my electricity consumption for HVAC systems at X point of time. And now, currently, in the present time, my electricity cost for HVAC systems have come down, let's say 2.75x, which is the case in this scenario. There is veracity. There is an outcome in terms of cost optimization. There is an outcome in terms of carbon optimization, right? Now, this is within the organization, something which is in my control. But what about my suppliers, right? Now, suppliers also have the same conundrum, right? Should I invest into something which will cost me? I'm already hard pressed by my customer, which is maybe an OEM, to reduce cost every year, right? That is something suppliers deal with. Now, if they have been given access to similar technology or some sort of access where it's not a decisioning for them that I need to evaluate so many softwares or so many consultants, bring them in, give them my data. Then there is also a challenge where they are scared that my economics or my pricing structure will be exposed to my customer if I provide a lot of information. So how do I go about it? So companies have to ensure and create trust, right? Like sensitization program and Akshay was talking about, right? How do we create that awareness, sensitization, the kind of data that is required that will not impact their, or it will not create an exposure towards their pricing structures, cost economics, and so on, right? So those kind of activities, again, can be done at scale. You can have technologies which can generate AI content and then disseminate at scale across your supplier base, one. Second, definitely the data that you are collecting, as I said, I gave the example of the ledger data that has come to us. Now that ledger data is in the systems, right? When you're fetching the data from the system and not manually entering it, the chances of errors, the manual errors, is also minimized because you're directly fetching information from the systems. Systems also have logs. So yes, this data has to be verified or audited at some point of time. But even auditors will look at the same data, right? The system data. And if you're changing it in the system, there will be logs also maintained, which can be verified whether this data is fudged or altered with and so on, right? So there's an inherent verifiability when systems talks to system, right? So that is another aspect that comes into play. Third aspect definitely is the scale. An automotive manufacturer, let's say Ashok Leyland, right, has around 1,000 suppliers, right? How do I sensitize them? How do I train them? How do I give them access to the technology that I am using today as Ashok Leyland? And then they are also able to provide information on that, and it gets analyzed, transformed, analyzed with hotspots identification and so on, right? So the all downstream activities, right, from data collection to decarbonization, right? How does it happen? So this is where, a good technology partner also comes into play, where the kind of offerings that are provided are, fungible across the ecosystem, can be easily transferred, and while maintaining the data privacy at scale, right? So one supplier's data is not getting exposed to their customers or any other supplier, right? So that is also something that is very important. And of course, there are data privacy regulations and also which have come in and safeguards suppliers against the misuse of information that they might be sharing. But again, the systems have to ensure these boundary conditions, right? That how there is a Chinese wall existing between different data sets, how it is accurately getting picked up, transformed, used to calculate emissions, and then once it is done, how it auditor friendly it is, right? Whether it has captured all the logs, whether it has captured all the details, whether it has taken, so for example, if I say I have, purchased X amount of steel in this particular month from this particular vendor. Now, whether invoices exist, whether a ledger entry exists. So it can look at multiple systems, identify similar information, correlate it, and then say, yeah, this is verified. And now it becomes my distilled source of truth, right? So this can happen at scale. Manually, it is not possible. It will never be possible, right? So being auditor friendly is again a very important aspect for any technology that you are using, so that you don't run into challenges when an auditor asks, where has this data come from, right? Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Akshay. So to summarize, the major aspects are: one is measurement, two is identifying hotspots and take action, and three is verification and reliability, right?
Right.
So to summarize, the digital platforms integrated with AI and automation will enable us to do this at scale. So Yashwant, what is the need of the hour? What is the need of the organizations, and what are their requirements, so that they can perform supplier engagements, so that they can perform supply chain decarbonization at scale? What is the need of the hour?
Okay, so I think we're almost towards the end. So let me take also a moment to some reflect upon one of the few major key insights, right? We're sitting at a very core intersection, right? Like our particular generation of this particular phase in sustainability is going through tremendous innovations. Uh, Take 1.5 years, 2 years back, if someone had to even think about scope three, it was a distant dream. Only because of the same challenges that we was just summarized thus far, the complexity, data systems across multiple multiple pockets, and then accuracy, mapping emission factors, a lot of manual intervention, right? One of the international German company, a German manufacturer, when we were interacting with them, they said that they were not even able to solve for PCF, and they've been trying to do work on this for last 3 years. Only because they're manually going through multiple invoices, putting so much of man hours into this, right? It's a huge cost factor. One of the major reasons why sustainability is not scaled is because it was too much of man hours into it, and people have not seen the benefits out of it, right? Coming to the same point that we discussed, if you have not even sorted for baselining, what will you do towards decarbonization or activities towards that, which could also essentially be cost savings, right? I think thanks to AI and the advancements in technology, now with a simple AI agent, you can run past it across all the invoices. The same manufacturers now in a position to solve for the entire piece of excess, which have taken them about 7 to 8 months in matter of few hours. So that is where we're sitting at it, right? Like, so as you mentioned, if you think what is the need of the hour, deploying usable technology at scalable phases is the need of the hour, and people are able to see benefits out of it. And then what is the need of the market in India and globally is that not to restrict only the baselining, right? Sustainability is just not restricted towards baselining, reporting, or assessment. What next, right? If AI is so powerful, along with our human intelligence, right, with the consulting experience that all of us gather, if we could also point them into right actionable steps, right, as to what can be done as A, B, C, D towards reduction is what people are chasing in India. Like West has already done that, and India is also doing that as a very pride and proud moment to look at it, right? We are in that very intersection point. And using technology to scale the problem statements and also to reduce the cost. So eventually, what took them about 10 people into 7 to 8 months is just taking about one or two people integrating with systems and then automating is a beautiful win for everyone, right? And then the same technology recommending towards implementing solutions, and the same manpower can now be deployed to implement solutions on ground, right? Not only for them but also for their suppliers. So that can be again tied up to something called as capacity building program. In Fitsol, we call this as a capacity building program for Scope 3, where we sit with a pool of about 100 to 250 of any OEM suppliers. We handhold them, right? Because you asked me the very first question, is there capacity gap or the knowledge gap? Yes, there is. And we are solving with a technology plus a consulting plus a program management play, right? Because initially, like many other companies in the market, we also thought it's a technology problem, but no. Even if you give it to them at free of cost, people will not use the technology because awareness and adoption is a huge challenge. So it has to be a intersection of technology plus program management plus consulting. So it's a beautiful play that we're solving for this, hoping that this will eventually become only a tech problem. We all want to be there, but it will take time. Next 3 to 4 years in a foreseeable future, people will need handholding of the entire concepts and then the technology adoption, right? So yeah, support in terms of bringing awareness and then using technology to scale the problem statements, and then bringing recommendations and meaningful implementation solutions, right? I think these are the phases by which the markets need solutions. And yeah, many people are solving, and we're also trying to run towards the same thing, and we're scaling this with the advent of AI. I think that's it from my end.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you, Yashwant. So the last thing to Meenakshi and Akshay, both of you, what are the capabilities in terms of ESG and tech that we are integrating in our tool, in our systems?
Meenakshi, you want to go first?
You can go ahead, Akshay.
Yeah. So quickly, Sukanya, could you please once repeat the question as well?
Yeah. So what are the capabilities in terms of ESG and tech that we are integrating in our systems, in our tool to simplify uh, the work that are being done by your clients or the organizations out there?
Right. So I'll also summarize it, right? So it is a good opportunity for me to do that. So as I said, access to technology in itself is a biggest conundrum, right? Which technology to use, how to use it, and so on, right? So the idea is that whenever a customer that we onboard, we give them a flexibility to onboard any number of their partners free of cost on the platform, right? Uh, uh, so Ashok Leyland, as I was saying, thousands of suppliers onboarded onto the same platform, right? They start calculating emissions and doing their own ESG assessments internally, right? And the technology is also built in some way which reduces the need of data transformation or selecting the data in itself, right? So what data to be shared, as I was saying earlier. So you upload your entire ledger data, we will make sense of it. You share your PDFs, invoices, RFQs, you make sense of it, right? Once the data has been transformed, again, everything is then downstream automated, right? So transformation, cleaning, category allocation, emission factor assessment, multiplication, calculation, analytics, right? Everything happens in a box within a couple of seconds as soon as the data is shared by the partners. So this happens at scale, and it also reduces a lot of complexity. Other thing is how, so now that I have calculated, how do I share this information of my GHG inventory or my ESG assessment to my customers or my prospective customers, or how do I put it on my website? How do I create a report? So with AI and all, now you can generate reports also in a matter of seconds. Just click on a button, the entire beautiful branded report can be generated, which you can publish, share in matter of minutes, seconds, and so on, right? So that also really helps with your own marketing. How, as a supplier, it's not that I would want to be dependent on a single customer, right? I would not put all eggs in one basket as such. And it works both ways. One customer would be sourcing similar, raw materials from multiple suppliers, right? They would not depend only on one. It's part of supply chain resiliency, right? From there, suppliers also have multiple customers, might be providing similar set of raw materials to multiple customers in the same domain, right? For them also to acquire newer customer, or maybe an Indian supplier wants to go global. They want to export to Europe or US or Middle East or other geographies. There might be multiple compliances that would be existing as per the geography that they are targeting. How can their existing report become compliant with those geographies in an instant, right? Given the data is same, inventory is same, ASG framework is same, right? How do I share this information at scale with them, right? So these kind of things can be really streamlined with the advent of and with adoption of technology. They don't have to put their mind into it. They can keep focusing on their core activities while system is generating all these nuances on its own.
Thank you so much, Akshay. Meenakshi, do you want to add something from ESG perspective?
I just want to sum up that the tool that we have is robust enough to actually calculate emissions for multiple suppliers at the same time. And like Akshay mentioned, that the system is also strong enough to, read data from multiple formats, whether it is PDF, whether it is Excel. And the final output that you get is not just your emissions inventory in the form of a PDF file or a report, but it also an insight into what are your emission hotspots across various categories of the scope 3 emissions and scope 1 and scope 2. It also gives you insights as to what are the biggest contributors to your scope 1, scope 2 emissions and scope 3 emissions. And then, like I said, that because this digital tool also has inbuilt databases, emission factor databases, you also get a list of the emission factor emission factors that have been used for calculating these emissions. So coming to the aspect of verifiability and auditability of the report, that also gets taken care of from the report that gets generated from the system. So that is all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So now we can open the floor for Q&A. So we can take up questions from audience, and you are also welcome to come with challenges, insights, feedback, suggestions as well. Thanks.
We I think have a question from Professor Kaushik Ranjan. Would you like to ask your question quickly?
Yeah, sure. Actually, one of the problems which I personally, it was very interesting to first of all hear all of you, and really, really excited to hear this because I have been working with, in fact, particularly on the issue of CBAM compliance. So that's one of the critical issues because in the sense that, and I have particularly looked at the steel sector, so there are big players as well as the small players. Now, what happens is what Akshay has rightly said, that there are small players who either do not have a business case for actually doing it, which I think you have aptly covered, or because of the fact that they're not aware or do not have the incentive to do so because they think that obviously the domestic market is good enough to actually cater to their needs. But when they're directly supplying to, for instance, European Union, they have to actually, in a process, comply with that. They may not necessarily have the capability. And as a process, and in that context, I would like to, and there are multiple tiers of them also across the supply chain. Sometimes for those small players, they're also taking stuff from big players. Big players might be complying to that. But when big players are taking from the small players, it is a responsibility of the big players to actually handle the small players to ensure that they are on a level playing field. That's all right. But how to actually ensure that? Because why I'm raising this question, because when I'm trying to meet the MDs of some of the like small players and ISCOs or who are actually the real suppliers, they're saying that it is actually becoming too costly for them to comply with that stuff. So I was just wondering that how this entire process of digitalizations will reduce that cost. I think it will reduce that cost phenomenally. So I just wanted to have your thought towards that because that would enlighten me in terms of my thinking process when it comes to compliance with, for instance, the more complicated CBAM, and particularly when it comes to the small players who are actually very placed in a very disadvantaged manner to actually comply with those requirements which EU has come up with. The ISPs, the big players can very easily do it because they have the capacity and the resources. So I mean, given your profound knowledge in the area of supply chain decarbonizations, then the way you have been doing it, pretty excited to hear the discussion. So if all of you or any one of you could take these questions and it could throw light on this, shall be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Akshay, would you like to take that up?
Yeah, I think, but this is on compliance and little nitty-gritties. I would like first Meenakshi to touch upon it, break down the question, and then I'll add to it how technology can solve it. But just taking this opportunity, Professor Bandyopadhyay, like calling us having profound knowledge is really humbling. Thank you so much. But I know your background, so thank you for joining us also and raising this question. So really appreciate it. So yeah, Meenakshi, if you could just touch upon CBAM, what kind of complexities these suppliers can probably, face, and then probably we'll talk about how technology can aid it as well, or how it is aiding in real life. Yeah.
Okay. So see, CBAM requires suppliers to provide the details on the embedded emissions of the products that they're selling to European Union, right? And the challenge I can understand that some small suppliers are facing is because they do not have the capability to, they don't have the awareness as to what data they need to actually capture in order to calculate those embedded emissions. For instance, for the steel sector particularly, I was trying to understand what the parameters that are required for calculating the embedded emissions is. One is that, the supplier needs to estimate what is the carbon content of the inputs that is going into the blast furnace, and then what is the carbon content of the output in the final product that they are exporting to European Union in the form of hot rolled sheets or, raw rolled, basically steel products. So knowing what is the carbon content itself probably is a big blocker for these suppliers. They probably don't know that, how to actually get the data on carbon content of the inputs and the outputs coming from the blast furnace. So right now we are trying to develop that kind of technology or platform or module that can, make it easier for the supplier to simply plug in the data of what is the raw material, what quantity of raw material they are using, and then what quantity of product that they're selling, and then what are the product level emissions in the final product that they're exporting to the European Union market. That is what will help. That, I mean, the digitalization can help in calculating those embedded emissions in the products. So if Akshay can add to that, that will be helpful.
Right. So there are complexities, right? Specifically related to embedded emissions and all. And another aspect of the cost is the kind of tools that are available today, right? The SEMA Pros and other scenario analysis, calculating PCF or LCA tools that exist are super costly, right? They are not. So that is one aspect. Second aspect is definitely uh, the kind of emission factors for different activities, right? Or how to calculate carbon content and so on are not very tailored for Indian geography per se, right? Most of it solves for the Western geographies and other developed regulated geographies as such. So there are certain nuances and challenges that exist when it comes to specific regulations and so on. While again can take a lot of assumptions and all and take best case scenario to build different scenarios around calculation of these embedded emissions and so on. It can be done, but it will require a lot of data input as well, right? So we are working on it, as Meenakshi said. That how do we collect data at scale for us to be able to provide this information as a reference point to the models to be able to run these scenarios at scale, right? And then again align it with the accuracy levels and so on. So it is a area of active research as of now within our ecosystem, and we are also playing around, trying to also understand how other tools work at scale and so on. So costly, yes, because of tools that cost today. License costs are huge. Emission factor databases costs are huge. Subject matter expertise, when you hire someone, huge costs, right? But when everything is, sort of configured into a system which can intelligently understand and take these decisions, the cost would definitely come down. But again, as I said, this is under research. So how much will it come down? Significant, right? But exactly how much, yes, will get to know. But otherwise, if you see in terms of man hours, right, even the accounting and all that, we are the JJ inventarization, which is a very straightforward activity. Uh, or let's say even GRI compliance, ESRS compliance, and these kind of compliances that exist, the effort earlier, manual effort would run into 3 to 4 months at least for very well documented organizations. Today it is happening in hours, right? The kind of internally teams are building tools for themselves using AI and all to be able to assimilate, collate, and churn out outcomes in matter of hours. Which suits their needs internally, right? Maybe not solving for others, but internally it is working very well. So this is a reduction itself of almost 99%, right? Similarly, in these aspects, specific compliances like CBAM and LCA and product carbon footprinting, these activities would also, the cost should also come down by 80-90%. We'll see to that and ensure that these kind of technologies will be able to accelerate the compliance adherence rather than and not being an obstacle to overall decarbonization and sustainability, which should be the focus.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we are at the end of our time. So that was a great discussion. Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. And we would be posting this on our YouTube channel. I would be mailing the link also to everyone in case you want to go through it again. So do follow us. We also have webinars, podcasts. So we'd love to have you there as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Akshay, Sukanya, Meenakshi, and Yeshwanth as well. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks guys. Thanks for joining in. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.